It's time to begin the Planning Commission meeting. If everybody will rise and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Okay. I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Okay.
My minutes do say that the motion passed unanimously, and I abstained, and I will say that does make me feel kind of lonely, but I understand. But I would like the reason that I abstained in there, and that was the fact that I didn't get the minutes in time to read them before the meeting. I just got them the day before, and customarily I'll look at them prior to that. So I'd second the motion to approve the minutes if we will go with that change to them.
Okay. Do we have a first?
I'll make them. Yeah, let's get it up for that.
Yep. All right. We'll have Mr. Red is the first, and then Mr. Lindsay will be the second, and then during the discussion part, Mr. Red asked that the reason for his abstain would be that he did not have the minutes prior to the meeting to review. Are there any other questions or comments or changes to the minutes? Those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I've got one on the minutes during the community plan update. Mr. Hope did give a update on the community plan, but he also circulated these vision elements and requested feedback from planning commissioners. So you all will recall this. We haven't. I want to amend the minutes to indicate that he did provide this and requested feedback from the planning commission on the. It was provided at the meeting. I think everybody got this at the meeting. Okay.
Well, I mean, if everybody else did, maybe I did, but I do not recall having received that.
Okay, so we'll change the minutes there to reflect the mayor's request for that request for information from the planning commission in regard to the CPAC that Dave Hoke wrote out a questionnaire.
It's a vision element that was provided in the packet for the commissioners, planning commissioners last week. So if we can make that note in the minutes, that would be great.
Has this been made available to the public? Or is
This was read out at the meeting, so it was public, and it was provided to planning commissioners at the meeting, and there was a request for feedback. I'm happy to read it again. In fact, let's go ahead and finish on the minutes, Mr. Chairman, and I'll provide an update on the Community Plan Advisory Committee. So I'll see Mr. Wilkes not here tonight.
Okay, we've had a request for 2 changes to the minutes. Are there any other requests for changes or additions, comments? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passed unanimously. The minutes have been approved. And that'll bring us right into the mayor's report from the Board of Commissioners, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me get my report here. So I know some commissioners were in attendance at our last Board of Commissioners meeting, November the 19th. It was a whopper. It was the longest Board of Commissioners meeting that I can remember. We started at 7 p.m. and I think it was after 11 o'clock at night. We had a packed agenda. I hope this won't continue to be the norm, but I think it was recorded so people can go back and listen to each and every minute of our last meeting of the Board of Commissioners. Things I would highlight from our last meeting was the building and codes report. So Building Inspector Blair indicated he had 3 certificates of occupancy and 2 new building permits for the month. So that was a highlight there. City manager gave a report on the parade, 47 parade entries so far. was a very successful parade, I have to say. Maintenance report, we got some assistance from Sevier County Electric to put up our Christmas lights, which I think look very, very good. So thanks to Sevier County Electric. We also approved a part-time employee to continue to help through the winter on various projects. And so there was a list of projects for streets and maintenance primarily that was provided, and the Board of Commissioners did unanimously pass an extension of a part-time position to help with some of those projects through the winter. As usual, Vice Mayor Satterfield provided a very extensive report from the Parks and Rec Committee. I won't go through all the different elements of that, but I think a number of the things for Parks and Rec will intersect with or be of interest to the Planning Commission. We also had in attendance with us city attorneys. So our city attorney, Will Carver, attended and provided a report and answered some questions about language in section 8-606 of the zoning regulations. This is, of course, the B3 Highway Business District, and provided some background and information based on his opinion of the zoning ordinance under the B3. And so also at that meeting, Mr. Carver addressed the board about how to recuse folks that might have a conflict of interest, direct or indirect, so he provided some guidance on that. We did have a update on the community plan as a standing item. The community plan continues to advance, and we're looking to finalize the vision and mission. That's why it's so important to get input from the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Commission on the vision statement at this point. We had a public hearing. Public hearing was on a request to rezone a parcel from B1 to B3. That would be the 5-acre parcel beside the Tally Ho Inn. The result of that vote showed that the request to rezone the property from B1 to B3 failed. So it did not pass with a majority. We had 2 commissioners in favor, 2 commissioners against, and 1 commissioner recused on that one. So that one did not advance because it did not have a majority. Also, under new business, I reviewed a list of priorities that I would like the Board of Commissioners to take on for the next 2 years. And so we agreed that we would have a workshop open to the public to set an affirmative agenda for the Board of Commissioners in terms of things we want to accomplish over the next 2 years. And I think we're currently looking for dates early in the new year to hold that workshop, which will be open to the public. Let's see, Parks and Recs advanced a request for qualifications that they reviewed and was approved by the Board of Commissioners. This is to inform about the project at the Special People's Park. So you all know that we recently acquired the property at the Special People's Park, and we've got some challenges, particularly with the platform, the ramp and the platform that goes down into the river. And so one of the steps that we've identified is it would be nice to get some consulting help for us on that particular project. Request for qualifications doesn't cost the city anything, but it does help us to start to identify some expertise that will help us on that. So that would be of interest to the Planning Commission. We had a presentation from Maryville College and some of their biologists on the water study. So you'll recall that we have been supporting, together with Arconic and some other entities, a study of the Little River. And so they provided their results on the Little River. And overall, it indicated that the condition of the Little River was in good condition. But there are certain conditions and certain times of the year that might warrant a little further study. And so we were pleased to hear that report from Maryville College. We also got a report from Sevier County Electric System. So we had Alan Robbins, he's the CEO of Sevier County Electric, provides power to this area, came and gave us an update on a project that is anticipated to begin in January 2025, and that is replacing the power poles through town. And so part of this project, the intent is to provide some resiliency between Sevier County Electric and Alcoa. And so starting in January, they're going to be replacing all the power poles from the substation that's down at the intersection with Wears Valley Road with a new, slightly taller, weathered steel power pole. And so if you look down there now, they've got 2 or 3 of these poles already up, and you'll get an idea of what they look like, how tall they are. But this project will replace all the poles that will go through Townsend, but it will also go up through the curves and connect with the Heritage substation. So there's a substation near the high school, and that will connect the 2 systems and provide resiliency in case there's a time when either of those power systems go down. So that will be important for our residents. We still do lose power at my house every now and then, and being able to have some resiliency, is important. And one step of that is replacing these power poles. So we welcome that overview of the project and hope that was useful for residents. In addition, I told you all it was a whopper. We had another new business. This was an ordinance potentially amending the City of Townsend zoning map to rezone a parcel 7511 Old Highway 73. We all know it's down near the Little River Pub and Deli, right adjacent to that. That was a request from Mr. Mike Aker to rezone that from B1 tourist business to B2 neighborhood business. And so the Planning Commission will be interested to know that that motion did pass unanimously, 5 votes, and as a result, a public hearing will be held on Tuesday, December the 17th for a second reading of that ordinance. I think we have Mr. Aker on our agenda for tonight. Okay, in addition to that, we had a number of special event applications that were discussed and approved, and we had public input. There being no further business, the meeting adjourned at 11:05 p.m. That was a whopper. Anyhow, that's your report and readout for anybody that wasn't able to attend.
All right, thank you, Mayor, for that report. That was quite a lengthy one there, but a lot of information to get through. Seems like you conducted a lot of good business that evening. Are there any questions for the Mayor regarding the report from the Board of Commissioners? All right, thank you, Mayor. Now we'll move into the public input part of the meeting. Those that signed in when you came in the door, there was an option to list if you'd like to address the commission. Gayla, I believe, has that list now. So as she calls your name, if you would, just come up to the microphone, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to discuss.
Dawn Eckert.
My name's Don Hedrick. I live at 307 East Chestnut Hill Road. I come before this board not because I want to hear myself talk. It's because things that you all do, along with the city council, make a difference in my livelihood. I hope that you all take that seriously. And one thing before I mention something, this is very awkward to have to come up here with no podium, Mayor. And I suggest that you get a podium. If you watch these people come before you and struggle with laptops and notes, you ought to take heed.
That's a good idea. We could bring that right there, that podium there, and put it right up here after we get done with people signing in.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, first thing is, I noticed we're still missing members. So I'd like a response. Why?
We went out with a call for expressions of interest, and I do plan to present some members for the BZA and the vacancy on the Planning Commission to City Council. next week.
Okay, good. Okay, now I don't have my notes, didn't have any place to put them, so. But I think there was one item on there. It was discussion of B3. What is it?
What's the discussion?
B3, yes.
The effectiveness of it, basically. I have a statement here I'd like to read later on, but just the viability of B3, how it works in this community, how it seems to not have worked at the last city council meeting. How, to me, B3 seems as though it's an ineffective ordinance that right now is hampering the city from moving forward. So it's going to be a general discussion of the B3 district at that time.
Good, yeah. Thank you. The other thing was, I looked at your own agenda today, and I looked at the city council agenda, and I saw on the city council, you're going to be talking about excavation, driveway permit, ordinance. Was that passed out of the planning commission by the form of a resolution?
That was in a recommendation, the language that was presented before us, that was voted on by the planning commission to recommend that to go to the city council for their consideration.
Okay. I guess I'm behind times, but when I was on the council, we would adopt a resolution to that effect and approve a resolution and send it on. So it has been sent on out of this group. Okay.
Yes, as a form of official action on that
Okay.
recommendation.
So when the public has a chance to have some input, it's already drawn up, right?
Yes, they're drawing copies of this that the city council had at the last meeting and acted on, and we'll have it at the next meeting.
Well, wouldn't it be better to have a final script of it before you send it on?
We had one at the planning commission
I
meeting
thought you were
and the
going
city
to critique
council.
that. Well, I understood it.
We had copies of the language at the planning commission meeting when the recommendation was adopted, and the copies were at the city council meeting as well, and they're available here in the municipal office.
And no changes have been made to that.
We did make changes.
Okay, so the public don't know about it.
Well,
They were discussed at the meeting.
So the language, as it goes before the form of an ordinance, has not been presented to the public.
It's the way- I think we followed the way that we always followed.
if the public would like any information,
Yeah.
they can come to this municipal building, and it's all public information. So if you'd like a copy of that ordinance, it's available.
Yeah, I understand this, Michael, but don't make it difficult for the public to find out what's going on.
Well, we hold open meetings where we discuss everything,
Okay.
and we have the
I'm
papers
sure the
here.
public would like to see the written ordinance before it's brought up to vote on.
Well, it's,
Okay.
it's discussed before we take action on it, and those copies are available here for anyone to pick up during regular hours.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, thank you, Don.
Sandy?
No, I wanted to speak about the discussion for B3, but since I don't know much yet, I don't have any questions.
It doesn't look like we have anybody else, just there is someone who wants to speak on the.
You go.
Mr. Myers?
Yeah, but his is an agenda item, so
Okay.
he's the site plan for 7511.
You'll be speaking on behalf of Mr. Aker?
Yeah,
Okay.
now,
No, not right now.
I'm ready to go.
We will definitely get to you. If that's the end of the public input, Caleb? All right. We'll move on into,
May I comment on that?
okay.
I wanted to agree with Don, and it gets back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago with regards to the minutes and my inability to vote on the minutes at the last session because I didn't get them until the day before the meeting. I think we're shorthanded at town hall now. We don't have a manager, but we're kind of limping along. But I think I've been on the planning commission now for almost a year, and I think I've said something about this almost every meeting that we've had. We have a problem with dissemination of information, not only to the public and allowing the public to speak about issues that are coming before the town from the planning commission perspective, but we also have a problem with information being received by the planning commission, as with my comments on the minutes earlier, my not remembering this last time, although I may be in error on that. It was a long meeting. I may have put it at the back of the pack and I didn't get to it, and I'll accept whatever blame I have to accept for that. But in regards to the minutes for tonight, we had an agenda just sent out well over a week ago now from Town Hall, and as I get here tonight, I'm presented with a brand new agenda, essentially. There's an item on here that I haven't seen, that is item number 3, discussion of the B3 district. I'm handed a new map. I know nothing about this. I've had no chance to review this. I can't adequately participate in any discussion about what the B3 district without any kind of ample opportunity to go ahead and review it. We're not getting the information out to the public. We're not getting the information out, from my point of view, to ourselves to the extent that we need to, and I think that's a pretty big problem.
Okay, thank you. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me turn to interim city manager and city recorder. When were the minutes of the meeting sent out?
The minutes were sent out December 5th along with the agenda.
Okay, and was Mr. Rhett on that email?
Yes.
I have a copy of what I was saying.
Well, I believe it's just like, Commissioner Rhett, just like these elements here that were presented. I know it's a lot of information, but commissioners do bear a responsibility for looking at their email, for preparing for the meeting ahead of time. If you don't get the information that you expect, then you can always flag up and ask questions. But what I've understood from other planning commissioners at this meeting is that we are circulating this information in advance, that other planning commissioners are receiving it, and if there's an issue perhaps with your email, we could try to address it. But if you're looking for something ahead of time, we put it up ahead of time, we provide this information, post the agendas ahead of time to the best of our ability. If you're not getting it, please let somebody know, but I think all the other commissioners are getting it.
Thank you, Mayor. Kim, did you have something?
Yeah, and the map was discussed quite a while back. This is just the electronic representation of that map.
Yes, at the last meeting, there was an inquiry about the window survey that was prepared and the information that was being derived from that being put into a map form by Kim's team, and he just got that done. That's why it showed up to us today.
And the hand-drawn one was presented a couple of meetings back.
Okay. All right.
So this is just an electronic version of that map that was presented.
But, like the mayor said, there is a lot of information, and we do need to be privy to all of it. And sometimes if I'm lacking in information, I come down to City Hall and I try to find the information I need. I encourage everyone to participate in that way as well. All right, new business. We have the final plat for lots 28 and 29 East Chestnut Hill Road. The applicant has submitted a site plan to combine parcels 28 and 29 into one parcel. Kim, would you please introduce this to us?
Sure, this particular applicant has come before us a couple of months ago or more, and they didn't make it for the last meeting. I reviewed it back then. I don't see any issues with it being consolidated. It meets everything that I think our ordinances require. So I would recommend
Okay.
that be approved.
All right. We have a recommendation from our planning staff to approve the final plat for lots 28 and 29 on East Chestnut Hill Road. I'd entertain a motion to approve in a second so we can bring it before discussion.
I'll move it to approve.
Okay, motion approved, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. As Kim has gone ahead and stated, he's reviewed the plat, it meets all the requirements. Meets all the requirements for the final plat subdivision. What we're doing is we're taking the two lots, 28, 29 on East Chestnut Hill Road, and we're just combining them into one lot at the applicant's request. All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor? Or is there, first, is there any further discussion or any questions regarding this? All right.
Might make one comment.
Yes, sir.
Is the applicant, do they have an HOA in the Chestnut Hills? Sandy, do they have an HOA in Chestnut Hills?
It's not active.
Not active?
Right. There is one, but it's not active.
Okay, you answered my question.
All right, any other questions? Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passed unanimously. All right, item number 2 under new business, site plan, 7511 Old Highway 73, Mike Akers, submission 1, camp on lot. The applicant has submitted a site plan with no building, but with a gravel pad to park his RV when using the parcel. I believe Mr. Myers is here to introduce this to us, please.
I don't recognize many people here. I see about a half dozen. I hope don't know the rest of you in none. But I'm here on behalf of Mr. Aker, my deputy. My family bought that lot in 1956. And they gave it to him, I think, in the 2000 years. I don't know when. But I beg the guy to do a variance on this, but I don't want people that have come to me in person and said they'd rather see the motor home there a few months out of the year than a big ugly building sticking up there. I think cooler heads should prevail here and give a variance on this. I can't believe what America has turned into. And I'm looking at everybody here. We don't own our dang property. We rent it from whoever it is and pay taxes, and now he's ordered to pay the grass, and mow the grass like a lawn. I kept it mowed for years. When I'd mow hay, I'd go by and mow the lawn. But grant this guy permission to use his own property as will. He's not asking for the world. He's just asking to park his motor home. You go up and down the highway, I see him everywhere. But there's a house next to him or a camper. That's not treating people fairly. And if we're about fairness, we got to take a look at this long and hard and do the right thing. I do appreciate your time and your consideration. I really feel deep down in you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Myers. Okay, and just to remind everybody, we're not looking to approve a variance or anything like that this evening. The request that's been submitted by Mr. Aker to this body has been for us to review a site plan that he has submitted and see if it fits all the regulations and rules for an approval of the site plan in a B1 district. So this is not for a variance or anything of that nature, just so you understand. All right, thank you.
But I would hope that cooler heads would prevail.
Understood.
This was changed without him being notified. He's paying taxes on it. He didn't have any idea of any kind of meeting that it was going to be rezoned. So let's do the right thing, guys.
Okay. All right. Kim, would you like to introduce this site plan submission and just give us an introduction here to us, and then we can take motions on it?
Sure. The site plan is to situate a mobile home. And you'll have to make a decision based on, you have to make a decision based on what it's in the ordinance. And if it's not based on, if the ordinance doesn't meet it, then you have to decide that it doesn't meet it. And if you want to reconsider it, then you can consider changing the ordinance. So the question is, the petition or the application is before what is currently contained in the ordinance for what he's proposing to do. It seems to me that the ordinance doesn't treat RVs as residences. That is why they are allowed to be parked adjacent to residences. Now, one can argue that Mr. Akins is not a residence in the strict sense of the word, but he has differing petitions that he has made of the city, one of which is to use it as an office in the meantime that he builds a building. So the shifting of the goalpost is what is also a confusing thing. As I also understand, he's also applied for a rezoning as well. So it's like we have so many targets and we don't know which one to proceed with first. So I would suggest that you simply talk about it per the ordinance, and if you see that you want to give him some due consideration, then it will have to involve also changing the ordinance as part of the CPAC process, because that's what is in motion right now. If he wants to go, if he gets denied and he wants to go before the BZA, as I understand, is also another option he's wanting to pursue, is that if there are 3 ways in which you can go before the BZA, one of which is to ask for an administrative review, which basically involves the assertion that a decision was made wrongly. Okay. Now, I'm not sure there's much room in the ordinance to say that the decision was made wrongly, because there's nothing in the ordinance that allows for somebody to occupy or have their primary use of their property be an RV, however short-term or intermittent. So that is something that there'll be some challenges to use the language in the current ordinance. Regarding it being a hardship, you could make the argument that he is having a hardship because it's in a floodplain, but a floodplain is a safety issue, and it has to do with FEMA regulations. And FEMA doesn't even allow people to rebuild on land that has been flooded, like how what's been happening in North Carolina. A lot of people are not being allowed to rebuild on some of their properties. So in some counties, I understand that they're actually thinking of doing away with FEMA designations for their particular county, so that people can choose to rebuild on their lands. But per FEMA guidelines, it's not possible. The third one is to do a special use on review. And in that case, the question is, the use for that designation is a stretch, or one has to have a room for interpretation to make the right decision that it can be used for either residential purposes and or business purposes as an office. But typically speaking, the use for that is to either make it a residential if it's R1, to make it a commercial use if it's B, and this is something that is in a gray area. So again,
And currently, he's seeking a B2, which is a neighborhood designation, which would allow him either a business or a residence.
exactly.
So
So
he's halfway through that process.
yes. So there's the one thing that we have also discussed with him is that he understands, or he's stated that the property is jointly owned by some family members. And we've also mentioned to him that if he can come up with an agreement with the family members, that when he builds the home, because at one point he was also considering building a home, then we'll have to just make sure that the owners or the co-owners are in support of what he plans to do with the property. So even on paper, whatever he would want to get done to the property, he would have to also indicate that his fellow family members are in alignment or in agreement with what he wants to do with the property, because on paper, he's a co-owner, it's not the sole owner. So those are the sort of issues. So they're muddy waters, and we hope that, something clean, clear, and fair can come out of it. But part of the issue is that we have too many targets to aim at in terms of making a decision.
In regard to this request that he's made this evening, the target is a site plan.
Yes.
And have you reviewed the site plan?
Yes, I read the site plan. He basically has a septic tank that wants to attach without a primary structure. And for that, he wants to use the RV. Now, he's mentioned that RV will be used as he builds, as a temporary construction site office. But then again, we don't have any indication that he actually is going to be building a residence or a business with, so he's asking that he build, well, he initially asked that he build a structure under which he can park his RV. And the further argument is made is that he should be allowed to do whatever he wants under the cover of his structure.
Inside of the building?
There you go.
Yeah.
But then also there's some issues that he has to deal with because it's in a floodplain. And that's another issue that we haven't been able to get some agreement with him. The bottom line is that I would suggest that he give us one concrete plan that we can discuss and work with him on. And I would say that the most viable thing is for him to work with his family members, come with something where he can build something on it, so he can operate it both as a home and as a business. But the stretch is, or the difficulty is, FEMA regulations. He given us too many targets to decide upon, and we've made attempts to discuss things with him, and I think we should still leave that room open for that to happen. But unless the ordinance is changed radically, it's going to be difficult to accommodate what we don't even seem to fully understand what he wants. So that's my take.
All right. So at this time, so the commissioners can discuss this, I'll entertain a motion to approve at this time.
I move we approve for discussion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second, so we can get it up for discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so we'll bring it to the commission for discussion. Kim, you did bring up several good points. I recall the first site plan that was submitted was just a blank site plan, very similar to this one, which also was titled Motor Home Site. Then we did receive when the discussion ensued that would not be approved, that a building, a principal business building would have to be on the property. We did receive another site plan that had a metal building on it. However, it was deficient in, I think, a lighting plan, signage plan, FEMA regulation. There were several deficiencies with that. So then we discussed different options, and now it looks like we're halfway through a B2 rezoning process to accommodate the establishment of a residence on this parcel as well as a building. So, in regards to what I reviewed on it, as far as this site plan stands for approval, I found 10 things that were deficient and that they were not addressed, they were not labeled, they were not put on the site plan. And through all these reviews, we've asked Mr. Aker time and again that if he has an element that's required on the site plan that he does not intend to incorporate in the site plan, he must still make a notation on the site plan that those elements will not be incorporated, such as a refuse collection area or the landscaping plan or things of that notion. So the majority of what I found deficient in this site plan as presented this evening are such things which would need notation to complete the site plan. I noted a proposed landscaping design, proposed location of the signage. We did not receive a drainage plan. He's not delineated any dedicated easements, the loading zone location, refuse storage. We don't have a copy of health department approval for the septic. We don't have location of any toxic volatile materials if they'll be on the property. The flood hazard has not been identified. There's no floodplain marking on the plat, and no lighting plan has been submitted either. So in that regard, I find that there's several things that are not included that should be included on the site plan. So I'll turn it over to other comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go back and recount a little bit. Mr. Akers been very clear with the city, with this planning commission, that his intended use, his primary preference, and he stated it numerous times, is he just wants to camp in his motorhome on his property. And I appreciate that. He's been straight up with us about what he wants to do. It's a beautiful piece of property. It's right there next to the river, and I can understand, why he wants to do that. Unfortunately, that's prohibited in our ordinance. It's just flat out prohibited. Nowhere in the city of Townsend can you set up an RV, a motorhome, and camp out of it. It's just not permitted by section 8-410. Now, this section of the ordinance was in here a long time before I ever came here. I'm not sure, what the history is of this ordinance, and so I tried to ask around to some of my neighbors. Why is this in here? This is obviously something that the city residents have wanted. And it was put in here, my understanding, because it's not dissimilar from many other communities in terms of regulating what you can do in an RV. So this is not, this ordinance is, what we have in our ordinance is not different from many communities. Your next door neighbor can't come up and start camping out of his RV in perpetuity. If you're in a business, the next door neighbor to your business can't come and just set up an RV, or 2, or 3, or however many they want. Now, people do have property rights, and we understand that owners have property rights, and we've been trying to work with Mr. Aker since June or July. First of all, to help him to understand what's in the ordinance and what the limitations are. There are some exceptions to this ordinance. And I've read these out in this meeting and in other meetings to Mr. Aker, and anybody can go in the ordinance and take a look at them. You can do certain things with an RV. So if I have an RV, I can park it in my driveway, I can park it behind my house or wherever to store my RV. I can't go out there and start camping in it. I can't have people come over and camp in my RV. I can't set up numerous RVs and let people come and camp in them. It's not permitted, but I can store my RV. If I have a business, I can store my RV on a business site. If I'm building a building, I can request and get a special permission to be able to utilize my RV while I'm building something. But it's just not allowed. And there's a reason for that, and that's because people didn't want this type of permitted use. I don't know when it happened, but it did happen. And if the residents have changed their mind now, there's a process, as city planner acknowledged, there's a process, and Mr. Aker has requested that we take a look at it, and we'll take a look at it. Our process is to have a workshop and see what people think about it. If people are interested in changing this prohibition, and it really is prohibition about camping in RVs, they can change it. There are certain exceptions. I think they're practical and feasible about when and where you can use an RV. One of the exceptions says you can park it in an RV park. So there is a process to change it. Mr. Aker's aware of that, and we're happy to entertain it. I'll put it on a workshop, and we can see what our city residents think about it. If we do it, if we change it, then, generally it would apply broadly across the city. Now, we can change it, but what is very difficult to do is to allow somebody to have one thing and nobody else can have that. And so Mr. Akers made it clear he would like to have a conditional use for this. And there's a process for that. So Mr. Myers talked about a variance tonight. This body doesn't do variances, but if it's rejected tonight or at some other time, there is a process for going forward to Board of Zoning Appeals and requesting a variance. But the bar for that has to meet certain requirements as a city planner.
Mayor, just one moment. Kim has been very specific with me in using the terms variance
Yes.
and special exception.
Yes,
And he
please.
doesn't like this to be crossed.
The variance is a very technical term. A variance has to have an ordinate extenuating circumstances that says that a property has some challenges. So there has to be a fully demonstrated hardship that allows somebody to have variance. Like I said, there are three things that can be done. The other one is, again, the conditional use. That is something that I would say that can be discussed in terms of changing the language for the next round of the CPAC process and the language in the ordinance and or the subdivision regulations. There are going to be a lot of things that will have to be tossed in the air, like juggled in terms of coming to a final decision. If Mr. Aker wants his RV there, and he invites 5 friends to bring theirs over there, and then they stay 2 weeks, and they're having a good time for 2 weeks, will the city, will the residents allow that? And if he decides that he wants to do something for an extended period of time, how much is acceptable for him to do for an extended period of time? That it's in a floodplain, what issues would FEMA have with it? So these are all the things that could be discussed in a workshop. But it definitely doesn't in any way qualify for a variance.
So
Because
the
a variance has
variance
to
would
be
not be
partial.
available through BCA.
No.
But the special use condition.
Special uses.
Okay, yeah,
I'm sorry, I
I
just wanted to.
I stand corrected. There's a difference between a variance and special exception. But the bottom line is, this part of our ordinance, at some point in the history of Townsend, people have decided that this is not something that they want to have generally allowed. And there are processes that are available. It does not mean that anybody can't use their property to the extent that they're permitted to use it. And this property is zoned currently B1. It's in a situation where he's requesting it be rezoned to a B2. I think we're trying to help with that. But it's important that, among all these exceptions in here, a lot of these exceptions to section 8-410 have to do with storing the vehicle, not necessarily occupying it. And so we want to be straight up with anybody that comes before this board in terms of what the rules are. And the rules have to be fair. And so if there's a suggestion that our residents and our community wants to change this, there's a process for doing it, and I'm happy to engage that process starting.
Thank you, Mayor. And also, if a special exception is pursued and granted, that would also set a precedent for other special exceptions to be requested as well. So I guess what the mayor was saying, if the residents decide that this is a restriction that they'd like to have lifted, it would be lifted citywide probably. And with the use of a special exception being granted, that would also open the door for possibly several other special exceptions, which would kind of negate the rule to begin with. So that's something to consider. Any other discussion? Okay, there was one other thing as well. This is a B1 district, and in order to build within the B1 district, you can only build a business in a B1 district. You can do residences in B2 or a business as well. It used to be that we could allow a residence in a B1 district until we incorporated the B3 designation here recently. So in regards to development on any B1 parcel, it's required that a site plan be submitted. This is a B1 parcel, therefore it is zoned for business use only. It does not allow for residential use. And one of the problems as well in this B1 site plan submission that we received, the title of which is motorhome site. We do not permit motorhome sites as a permitted use within B1 districts. So in addition with the 10 exceptions that were not included in this site plan, it is also titled to be a motorhome site, which is not a permissible business type use in the B1. I just wanted to make that noted. All right, any further discussion or comments?
Just one comment, Mr. Chair. I've already had two different gentlemen that were very interested in this, the development of this request. And as the mayor, Keem had always said, they're curious because if this passes, they're the next ones up here.
So you're saying that there's other individuals you've spoken with that are looking, well,
They've already told me.
yeah, so if there's a desire amongst the constituency to have a change, and that's something that we should definitely listen to. I believe, Mr. Myers, did you have one more thing you wanted to
Yes, when was this change made?
It was,
And who did it? Like, we talked about the peaceful side of smoking, but then all the houses down through there on the river or in this. Who decided to change it? I don't believe it, the residents did.
well, I've been involved in planning for almost 20 years now,
Yeah.
and this was established well before I was in planning. Ed Stuckey was the chairman at that time. This is the first time we've ever had the motorhome issue come up in Townsend, where somebody was adamant about having a motorhome on a vacant lot. So in all my tenure and everything I've heard, this is the first time it's ever come up. It's just something that's always been on the books.
Okay, well, that camper's on vacant lot.
The same thing, RVs, campers, motorhomes.
Keep going right up down the road.
All right, so this is in regards, we have a motion and a second to approve the site plan. Is there any further discussion or any questions or comments? All those in favor of approving the site plan, signify with A. Those opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed? Opposed. Okay, so the site plan approval has failed unanimously. That's my agenda. All right, new business, number 3, discussion of the B3 district. This was an item that I thought that,
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to excuse myself from the discussion. I will say I did check over the agenda package that I received earlier based on the comments from the mayor tonight. And I did in fact have item number 3 on that previous agenda. I missed it. In all the paper that I get, that one item I did in fact miss. And so I'm not prepared to discuss that as a regular table matter. So that's why I replied.
all right, well, if you find that you think of something that you'd like to interject and discuss with us, please feel free to do so. This is going to be an open discussion, and it is basically on the effectiveness of the B3 district as we tried to utilize it this last time through city council. I wrote down a letter, a statement to the city council, and me personally as the planning commission chairman, that I'd like to read now. And I think it kind of sums up my views on the B3 and how the B3 is currently hampering Townsend right now in our zoning process and our ability to move forward. So I'll just read the letter right now. And this letter it'll be available to anybody who likes it as well. It's a public record. Okay, subject, recommendation to revert zoning ordinance to previous B1 and B2 district designations. Dear City Council members, I urge the City Council to take immediate action to revert the current zoning ordinance back to the previous B1 and B2 district designations and reconsider the B3 district designation. A request was recently made by an applicant to rezone a property from B1 to B3 to accommodate the development of an RV campground. While the applicant met the requirements for the components of the zoning regulations, the rezoning request was ultimately denied. Given the challenges and limitations that have arisen from the B3 district, I recommend returning to the previous B1 and B2 districts for the following reasons. 1. The B3 district is currently unusable. The B3 district, as it stands, does not provide a viable zoning option for development. Number 2, concerns about future development. The denial of the rezoning request for the RV campground was a result of concerns about the broader types of businesses that could be developed under the B3 designation, leading to uncertainty in the planning process. 3, lack of a clear path forward. Currently, there is no clear or feasible path for for the development of B3 businesses in Townsend under the existing ordinance. 5, need for reevaluation. It has been suggested that the B3 district, quote, needs to be looked at again in more detail, end quote. Any changes should be aligned with the broader land use plan and the Townsend community plan, ensuring better integration with the city's vision. 5, lengthy process for reworking the B3 ordinance. Reworking the B3 ordinance would likely take several months of workshops and voting, causing delays in the zoning process. 6, past success of the B1 and B2 districts. The previous zoning system of B1 and B2 districts functioned effectively and without significant conflicts, unlike the challenges we are currently facing with the B3 district. Efficiency in administrative services. The city has an obligation to provide timely and effective administrative services to the community. The existing B3 designation is proving inefficient in this regard. The failure to utilize the B3 district for the rezoning request demonstrates that the ordinance in its current form is not functional. Therefore, I recommend that the City Council take action at its next regular meeting to remove the B3 district from the zoning regs and re-implement the B1 and B2 districts as previously used. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Sincerely, Michael Daly, Chair of the Planning Commission. Currently, right now, we do not have anything in effect that will allow for the use of any business type listed currently in the B3 designation. Anyone who comes in tomorrow and requests a B3 designation, ultimately, I believe, will be denied such designation. It has been mentioned by several members of the City Council that the B3 designation needs to be looked at again so that commissioners or council people feel more comfortable in being able to use it effectively and appropriately as it was intended to be used. Until we can correct the deficiencies in the B3 district, we do not have a zoning and planning process in place for the city. The city needs such a process in place to effectively handle requests from the individuals. So until we have B3 ironed out and workable, I recommend we go back to the old functioning system that we had just a year ago. Those are my thoughts.
Can I make a comment, Mark?
Yes.
First of all, I like your letter. I think it was well thought. I had come prepared to suggest that we rescind the ordinance creating B3 and use the existing word of the previous, which, for instance, allows single-family dwelling in the past configuration. That's what I intended to suggest, and that's basically what you've suggested. You've used a whole lot more elegant words, but I agree with you 100%.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to provide some reflection on this. One of the things that we always say when we put in place a new ordinance, whether it's for special events or for food trucks or whatever we'll put in place, we put in place an ordinance, but it doesn't mean that it's static. We get experience every time we put an ordinance in place. And if something is not workable, there's an opportunity to go back and revisit. One of my concerns, and I think folks have heard me say this before, is I'm concerned that we're not providing sufficient opportunities to encourage full-time residents here in Townsend. I think that's going to work against us in the future. We need to have a balance of full-time residents here. One of the things that we did when we adopted the B3 is that we did take out homes from that. And so I think that might be another opportunity to put that back in. It does create certain challenges. And so this planning commission and the city council did have some discussion when we put the B3 in place about removing residences. from the B3. And the discussion went along the lines of it's very hard sometimes to make compatible uses. So when you've got a business that operates on a schedule, has a lot of lights, maybe generates a certain amount of noise, if you have a residence, if you're living there next to that business, that can maybe create some challenges. But I will say that it was permissible previously in the B1 and the B2 to have a residence. And maybe that's an aspect of this that we might want to rethink, because I think we do want to afford every opportunity to have full-time residence for people to come and make a home, not a vacation home, those are important too, but just to have people that live here all the time, that can have children here, and can grow up here and have jobs here in Townsend. And so I think that's an aspect, I think Commissioner Jenkins, that you said, probably needs to be relooked at. Does that mean we need to rescind the B3? Now, part of the impetus for the B3 was in some decisions that came before this board and before the city council, where developments were brought to the planning commission as a site plan, as they're supposed to be. And the planning commission gets to approve site plans. They don't go to the board of commissioners. And what we have before was basically, we didn't have any B2, we still don't have any B2. But let me be clear, there's no B2, there's no B3 in Townsend right now, there's B1. We do have 3 zoning types that have different types of proposed uses. We have a tourist business district, we have a neighborhood business district, and now we have a highway business district that has more intense uses. And so we do have some gradation in Townsend for the first time. It wasn't that long ago, everything was in B1. Every permitted use that you could imagine, unless it was accepted, was in B1. You could do anything. Everything was in B1. And our residents, when something come in, a big development or something, the residents had no opportunity to come and provide any input on that. And so if we rescind B3 and it all goes back to B1 like it was before, these developments will not come for a public hearing. There will be opportunity at the Planning Commission to provide public input, but the public input we got in those circumstances was frustrated. And I'm not saying that the planning commissioners were frustrated. I'm saying that the people, the residents, were frustrated in providing that input because the planning commissioners have to follow the rules. If a site plan meets all the requirements in this zoning ordinance, it should be approved. Planning commissioners don't get to weigh in on whether they like the permitted use or they don't like the permitted use. If it meets the requirements, the site plan should be approved. And residents didn't understand that. They said, why would you want to allow a certain type of permitted use to happen? How could you, as planning commissioners, allow that? Well, the reason is we're trying to follow the rules. If you don't like the rules, there's a process for changing the rules. If you don't like the B3, you need to recognize what's going to happen if you rescind the B3. If you rescind the B3, that means site plans will come to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will have to follow the rules. Planning commissioners do not get to weigh in on whether or not they like the flavor of the permitted use. Now, we're going through a period of time, not only with our Planning Commission, but with our Board of Commissioners. It is very challenging because we are discovered at this point. And so people are proposing all kinds of really interesting things, but we have to make good rules and we have to follow them. If the rule we make maybe needs to be tweaked, that might not mean that the rule altogether is not the right rule. It just might mean that as we get some experience, and this was the first time that we had experience using the B3, that there might be a need to tweak it. But one of the important things, and as mayor, I'm trying to reinforce this with planning commissioners and with our board of commissioners, we have to make good rules, we have to follow them. Okay? We go through this with special events all the time. People ask me, they say, why do all these special event applications come to the board of commissioners? If I go to any other city, a special event gets done by city staff. Pay $50 and I get my permit to go in. Well, it was not 2 years ago that we did not have any special event ordinance. We had an application to put in, but there was nothing that required anybody to do anything. And so the Board of Commissioners put in place a special event ordinance. We've had to go back and revisit that ordinance several times. We have a workshop. If something doesn't work, just like we suggested tonight, we'll have a workshop. We'll get broad community input. If it looks like it's something that we can improve or should improve, we'll take a look at it and improve it, but then we'll follow that. But the Board of Commissioners does not get to weigh in on whether or not they like any particular certain event. Okay? And it's frustrating to people that come. I have people write to me about this. We have people that come and will speak about different special events. But what they have to understand is whether you're a planning commissioner or a member of the Board of Commissioners, you have to follow the rules. If you have a special event ordinance, that's all you get to weigh in on. Did it meet the criteria or not? If it's a site plan, all you get to weigh in on is does it meet the criteria or not. That's the process. If our residents don't like it or they have a good idea to improve it, we will certainly do that. And we will certainly take note of that. And workshops and meetings like this and public input is how we do that. But just remember that if you return from the B3 and put it all back the way it was before, then what that means is that site plans will come to the Board of Commissioners. There will not be public input on any additional proposals, including for things that are described in this section B3 as high-intensity uses. What people didn't understand as they wrote to me about this, and I got a lot of folks that wrote to me, and I'm so glad for that. I try to answer as many emails as I could. But what people don't understand is that all these permitted uses were in the B1 before. This is not somebody's good idea to all of a sudden break Townsend wide open for big box stores. The big box store was in B1 before, along with everything else. Some people said that means B1, wide open for whatever you want to propose. Planning is trying to get the right things in the right place so that you can have compatible uses between neighborhoods and businesses. The state of Tennessee has a whole section on planning. Planning goes back thousands of years. I've heard it said at some of our meetings, well, we like Townsend. We just like to have a business here and a vacant lot here and a house there. We like it that way. Well, you like it that way until your neighbor decides to do something that you didn't anticipate. Trying to get compatible uses together is what this planning process is all about. The community plan is an attempt to get the city and our community on the same page about generally sort of where things go. So that 10 or 15 years from now, when that vacant lot that's already zoned B1, which many of these lots are, look at this right here. We're going to be discussing this. See all that dark stuff, that red on there? That's what's currently zoned business. How many of these are vacant lots? Well, there's a whole bunch of them. People like these vacant lots in Townsend. Looks good. But these property owners have the ability to use any permitted use that's within their property rights. How did it get this way? Did this happen on Mayor Don's watch? No, it did not. The reason I got involved in going to the Planning Commission to begin with is because I looked at this map. It hung out there in the lobby for a long time. I don't know how it got this way, but this is going to be a problem. If all these vacant lots, people like to come to Townsend because you can drive up and down the road. You can see the river, you can see the mountains. But these lots are owned by people that have property rights. And if we don't get busy really quick on our community plan and try to get organized a little better, we're going to regret it 10 years down the road, or maybe not even that far in the future. So it's really, really important that we get busy on this community plan. It's important that we hear from our community. We've taken months on these elements of a community plan. What do we want in Townsend? What's important to us? I hear we don't want to end up like the other side of the mountain, Pigeon Forge and Captainburg. Bless their hearts, I got family over there too. And there's things that comes with it, there's pros and cons to all of that. But if you want to end up in the peaceful side of the Smokies, which is what I generally hear, I live here full time, and that's really what is important, I think, to me and a number of other people, is preserving the unique character of Townsend. How are we going to do it? Well, we're going to try to use the community plan. We're going to make good ordinances, and we're going to follow them. Okay? Commissioners get to weigh in on certain things, they don't get to weigh in on other things, and we're going to explain the process so that people aren't frustrated, so that when our community brings the input to us, they understand what the limitations are. If we're not getting something right about this B3, and I agree, there's an experience here, maybe we ought to put homes back in there. We ought to take a look at it. So, I'm sorry, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Mayor. Kim, you have a comment?
Yes, I do not believe that whatever the zoning designation is the problem or the issue at hand. You can have B1, B2, B3, and it's still not allowed, or it will seem to not prohibit one use or another. What the mayor said that resonates with me is that the process for a town's development largely rests on negotiating somebody's rights against what you want the public to have in terms of this municipality. Now, I'd say that every single development, for the most part, should not be held for ransom, should not be treated unfairly, should not be treated with bias, given strict definitions. The problem with your ordinance is that there are too many strict definitions of what is and what isn't. And I believe that it should rather strive for what the city is trying to achieve, rather than to have gamesmanship about what a definition is. Definitions don't hold indefinitely. As I've said once before, what a hotel was once before is not a hotel now. And if you would go strictly with a definition of what a hotel is, and you give persons, the developers, people want to put in ventures, the right to a decision, then in short order, Townsend would be, I can guarantee, would be just like Pigeon Forge, because your definition says that it should be allowed. I'd rather say that you should come up with the intent of what your zone should be, and every single development should be up for negotiation for some give and take in both people's parts to make sure that somebody's having rights to the property, somebody's making income from the property, and such that it doesn't compromise the character, the health, or the welfare of the community. So when I get around to the Gantt chart, I would discuss some things that I think you need to be thinking about. One of which is to have something sort of like an overlay. So you can say that in B3s, we want to make sure that they are in keeping with the character. And the character that we want is commercial development, but we want it to be low impact. So the question is, how do you decide with that owner what constitutes as low impact? Rather than saying that it doesn't meet this because it doesn't have an RV in it. It doesn't meet this because it's not a hotel. doesn't meet it because it's not in this, those definitions are the ones that are actually strangling you. And at the same time, they're going to give your adversaries a lot of room to sue you. You know, so I think that we should walk away from that kind of definitions. If Mr. Akers wants something, let's sit down and talk to him. If the properties that he wanted to sell, let's talk about it. I even came up with a solution for that, but everybody was hard-headed on what their game was, and it ended up not getting the city anyway. I would say that the problem is not with B3, the problems are with the definitions of what is allowed in B3. So the question is, make B3 a room in which you can have some discussion, some negotiation, some room for shared vision, whereby the developer and the town gets what they want. That's the simple thing. And the CPAC process will address that. And one thing that I've mentioned to you before, is that zoning is not a chess piece. Zoning actually can really trip you over. If you think it does one thing for you, you'll be surprised that it will end up giving you something else altogether. Some cities have said they want 5-acre lots. They want this, they want that. You get a 5-acre lot. Somebody comes from out of state with a lot of money, buys up the property at an inflated price. It's happening in Austin. It's happening slowly but surely around East Tennessee, in Loudoun County, perhaps, for example. And in the end, the locals get priced out of their own community because they thought they were being strategic about keeping people out. But you're keeping people out who are not the people that you think you're going to be keeping out. The people who can come in by right and buy your property are the ones who are going to surprise you. And now you have properties around East Tennessee that people, the locals can afford. They have to live outside of the city. You know, so I would always say that do not go with these strict definitions that you think is getting you somewhere. It will get you nowhere eventually down the line, if not 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And 10 years from now, the dynamics around the country will be completely different. Long time ago, people were not moving from California and wherever else to come and buy property over here. They had it hard where they are, but come here now and they're changing the dynamics of the town. So the question is, stick to what you want this town to be and use it as a room for negotiation for everyone's rights and privileges. Full stop.
I agree with Kakim. There's a couple of things though that I am a big box developer. Townsend, I love Townsend, been there for about 70 years. They do. This will never be a Pigeon Forge, it will never be a Galvin. I live there and I developed from Pigeon Forge to Galvin. The terrain, it'll stifle. But be that as it may, we can put parameters around what we want to come here. But to say that we're going to negotiate everything, you can't. You can't. The word fair, what's fair to you might not be fair to me. And I was looking on, I was talking to my corporate attorney yesterday. I took him to lunch and we decided to stay. I said, I need to ask you a question. On the situation that up here next to the Tally Ho, I said I wasn't at the meeting, but they told me that all the requirements were met for that particular zone. But it was turned down. You can't do that. They did. He said, well, if you set the parameters and they meet the parameters, there is no, you can't interject your feelings or your opinions or anything else in that. You are charged as a city commissioner to follow the rules and regulations, whether you like them or not. And this is where we've got a couple of buildings in this town now that I didn't like, I still don't like, but I voted for them because they met the requirements. And my job as a commissioner here was, did they meet the checklist that we had? If they did, fine. If they don't like what it is, then change the law or the ordinance that you want. Change it. But if you've got an ordinance on the book, follow it.
But let me say this, whatever you're discussing about that particular property, it did not meet the requirements in the fact that the RV park is not allowed in that district. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the discernment should be made that the pre-existing uses across the street are not allowed uses. They are non-conforming uses. Okay, it's another thing. So, the idea was to use the B3 to then allow what it says it allowed, which is an RV park. Right? Now, people misinterpreted and then didn't use the technical provisions in the ordinance. So, if everybody had prevailed to think it through, they would actually suggest that it be a B3, so that could actually be allowed. Now, the buyer had plans for the larger area, not only for that one particular property. So the question is that he wanted to have a complex of hospitality. The RV, the hotel, the restaurant. So then I would suggest that the argument or the discussion comes around what sort of hospitality do we want to allow or accommodate or encourage in Townsend? And let's figure out a way to make that happen. But then, rather, people are saying, no, it doesn't meet this and the zoning designation is too broad. It was too broad in the first place because you didn't think through the definitions of what should be allowed in there. And it's not the definitions that make for the character, it's the intent of the character that makes for the character. You see what I'm saying? And that character is something that it's flexible, it's amorphous, it's open for interpretation. So if it's open for interpretation, then let the two parties sit down and have a discussion about how that can be done. Give you an example about big box developments in Charleston. They allow big box, but they don't make it appear as though it's big box. And they don't allow it to compromise the character of their community. So the question is that when that happens, there is room for that discussion to happen. And Charleston has done that through aesthetic, okay, and also design standards. I mean, basically, so they come up with, okay, you want to have this here. Please don't come and defile our community in terms of its appearance. Don't make us ugly.
City planner, I think I understand where you're going now. I didn't at first understand. I was like Commissioner Lindsay. I thought maybe you were suggesting we ought to negotiate everything.
No.
I don't think that's a good idea. I think you have to have a general idea of sort of where things are. How do you want things to sort of be organized? And then I did like the idea that you discussed about overlays.
Exactly.
And so overlays sort of say what we're encouraging in this certain area. And those are the tools that give guidance to planning commissioners and to board of commissioners. So I think I'm understanding what you're saying. I don't think you're suggesting that there should be no plan and everything's already negotiated. What I think I'm understanding you to say is that there's a general picture. You start with something like a vision. What do we want Townsend to look like? Do we want, light pollution? Do we want, other types of things? What's the big picture? Then how are we going to organize ourselves? How are we going to get there, given where we are now, which people better pay attention to? How are we going to get there in a way that maintains our character? We've talked about having a design board. And so all these things are coming down a little bit more granular, which I think makes sense. And as you get more granular, you can have more flexibility. But if you don't have sort of a vision for where you're headed, people say they like going to communities that sort of have a common aesthetic to them. You mentioned places like Hilton Head. Hilton has, people have sent me pictures. I haven't been there in a long time. But the aesthetic, in some ways, with respect to their signage, just something that people think, hey, that might be a good idea. There are other communities that have lighting standards, shielded lights and things that allow what's supposed to be illuminated and, helps preserve dark skies and other things like that. That's what we're hearing from our residents. And so we've got to figure out how are we going to get there. The first step is, how are we going to organize ourselves? And then you can have these overlays that allow some flexibility. So I think I'm starting to follow you now a little bit.
Well, Mike, could I say something? At the last meeting, city council meeting, the attorney said parts of the B3 ordinance were unenforceable. Particularly the portion where it required a agreement between the property owner and the city on how it's going to be used. And he said that was unenforceable, and therefore the ordinance was questionable. He didn't use the word questionable. That was my thinking after what he said. It put a cloud over the whole approval, as you know. And I think if you're going to keep B3, you got to make it more clear. You can't say, oh, the guy that has this piece of property is going to make some agreement with the city that it's going to always be used as a campground, or it's always going to be used as a gas station. Because when he sells it to somebody else, it can be something else. The city attorney said it was unworkable, and that created a real problem for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that's what the city attorney said. He did not say it was unworkable. The city attorney offered his opinion on what the ordinance says and how it would be implemented. And what I recall from that discussion is that there are a variety of tools that would be allowed. There's an odd section in the meeting. I asked him to explain this section on unilateral agreement. And so what does that mean? And so the intention there was that it was rezoned to a particular permitted use. Well, if somebody wants to change that permitted use, what does that mean? How's that going to happen in the future? Because you make a decision of rezoning sometimes based on is it a compatible permitted use. And that language that's in the B3 right now is intended, it might not be, the best and might need to be refined. But what I did hear city attorneys say is that there are mechanisms. And so when a business comes, if they have a site plan to be one type of permitted use, if they're going to change to a different permitted use, well, there's a process for that. They'd have to come to this planning commission and submit a new site plan and say, if I'm going from a RV to a water park, I'd have to present a new site plan. And there are mechanisms to be able to consider subsequent permitted uses. And that's how that was intended to be implemented. And there are tools that the city has to enforce it. I heard it said, oh, well, all you can do is give them a $50 fine. But there are other tools, and I think what we were trying to do, this was recommended by the Planning Commission, I think unanimously, was adopted by the Board of Commission at 2 readings. And so we're trying to be thoughtful about how we can get
About
there.
the B3 ordinance?
B3.
That was a split decision, 3 noes and 4 yeas. It just barely passed.
Okay, that's still advanced from the Planning Commission with the recommendation.
Just made it, yeah, it's barely.
Okay. But it was recommended by the Planning Commission, approved by the Board of Commissioners. Does that mean it's perfect? No. Is it a legitimate attempt to try to, address the situation and, that our residents have expressed and brought to us the fact that we didn't have any different sort of zoning types in Townsend? Yes. Can it be improved? Probably. I'd be open to seeing if there's ways that we could improve it. For example, by including homes so that we can have every opportunity for people to have a home in Townsend.
Well, I have a question. Is that ordinance workable? Does it work? If the applicant were to come back and request the same rezoning, would it work? No, it wouldn't. It It's not workable. And until we have a workable B3 solution, I think we need to go back to what did work and worked for several years. Because when will B3 be revised? I've heard it mentioned that it needs to be part of the community plan, and the community plan will be finished till later on this summer. So basically, we're gonna put off anybody that wants to develop any one of these types of businesses that we've taken out of B1 and thrown into B3. Anybody that wants to develop any of those is not going to be able to move forward doing anything, because B3 is unworkable. It does not work, because this was the perfect spot, 5 acres, up on a hill, already was screened with a tree line, everything, met all the physical needs to be rezoned. However, it failed due to concerns of council members who were unsure about how to use the amendment. If B3 was something in the comments that were made in the public hearing were, keep B3 out of Townsend, it's going to ruin the peaceful side of the Smokies. I think B3 has been labeled as some kind of a disruptive new thing that's been introduced into this town, and it is not. So until B3 works, we need to go back to our workable system. This city has an obligation to provide administrative services and to keep things going, and right now we do not have a zoning process that is workable.
Let me just respond on that if I could. I received a number of those same comments, and I think there was a real misperception about B3. I think the community thought that all the permitted uses in B3 were something that we dreamed up. That now we're going to make, Townsend all of a sudden have all these permitted uses in here that it never had before. But that was the perception. People said we don't want B3. That's not what they meant. What they meant is we need to look at, these high intensity uses. And people have opinions on different high intensity uses. And some of those might be compatible, some of those might not be compatible, but you're right in that it became, misunderstood, because I think people really thought that all of a sudden there were all these, B3 was going to facilitate all these uses that were never there before. And so things that might be a compatible use might have gotten lumped in there. And so people might have thought otherwise if they hadn't, sort of had that top line view of the fact that these were all new uses. Well, I got news. These were all permitted in B1 before, and if they go back to B1, they'll all be permitted in there again with a site plan that comes right to the Planning Commission, which rightly, the Planning Commissioner should follow the rules of the site plan. So just know what you're requesting.
So, are you saying that before a campground was allowed in B1?
Yes.
It was.
Yeah, it came, you arrived right after the B3 implementation.
Exactly.
Yeah, so everything was in B1. Due to the concerns from the public that we heard over the yonder development, it was suggested that high-intensity developments should probably be put into another district, the B3 district. So upon the request to rezone, it will have a public hearing component that the commissioners can listen to, the councilman can listen to. And that's another component of this B3 review that I am in disagreement with. It seems as though the council members think that there was opposition to the rezoning, whereas if you listen to the public hearing comments, it was almost 2-to-1 in support. However, it was still voted down based on public comment. So we have something in place that is proven to me to be arbitrary on its very first usage. And until we resolve these problems with B3, we need to have a workable solution in place. City council can take action at the next planned meeting, and then there's a whole nother month until the next regular city council meeting for consideration and discussion to where they can take action again, and we'll have workable zoning back in place by January. If not, it could be the end of summer if we just keep on kicking this B3 can.
So, if B1 allows campgrounds and B3 allows campgrounds, the issue still remains that there's disagreement on campgrounds, right? So whatever destination it's under, it doesn't really matter. Because the idea is that the issue is the perceptions of what a campground is, right?
Or any B3 business is.
I'm saying that whether it's under B1 or B3, it's a campground.
It's a campground.
And the issue was a campground, right? Okay, so what I'm saying is that the problem is with the strict definition of what a campground is, more so than whether it's under B1 or B3.
No, the definition was never discussed as a point of contention as to why the rezoning failed. The rezoning failed because of the concern of all B3 business types now being permitted into this newly created B3 zone. Although it was specified it was going to be for an RV park, I do acknowledge that in the future, it could, any one of those permitted B3 business types could be subsequently built on that property in the future. And the attorney confirmed that as well. That was one of the reasons why I believed it failed.
All right. So now, if you
Not the
move
definition.
back to B1, you would only allow in the campgrounds and dispense with everything else?
No, if we revert back to the old style, then all permitted business types can be zoned in Townsend, and Townsend can function with operational zoning. We can zone things. But until that happens, any one of these permitted business types that have been relegated to the B3, I don't believe are going to be actionable due to the concerns of council people. So let's just revert back to the working thing that's worked for who knows when it was even implemented. It's been more than 20 years ago as far as.
Okay, so let's say 5 business owners in Pigeon Forge want to build hotels over there. And each of the hotels wants its own parking lot. And you would have to allow them to have them, right?
You'd have to allow them,
To build those hotels.
if applicants came in and they met requirements, yes.
Okay. Now, will that be in keeping with the character of Townsend? It won't, right?
Why is that?
Well, because if you have one business after another, big box or otherwise, coming in, and they all can be, they'll be allowed to operate by right, right? And I'm asking you, is that what Townsend wants?
I think it's what Townsend needs right now, because we don't have functioning zoning. We need ways for zoning to be accomplished, and right now it's not working.
There you go. And so that's why I'm saying that there are tools, like the lawyer said, for that to happen. One of which is to have an overlay, right?
But how many months will it take to establish these overlays and these new districts and have the workshops and then have city council vote on it? And then during that time, we won't have functioning zoning.
You will. And this is the way that I had suggested that Brett do it. That if he had wanted to do what he wanted to do, and he wanted to put in the RV park, and he had intentions to buy other portions of your property, then that's where I would have said, for example, that Townsend needs to think about adopting a plan unit development approach to plan, especially on B3 zonings, so that the idea with the plan unit development is to have a unified development concept. And that unified development concept will be a proposal for which it will be negotiated to make sure that it has a character that is in keeping with Townsend. So for example, what I suggested to Brett was that he should actually have a proposal saying that he wants to do the plan unit development of the restaurant, the RV park, and whatever else he was planning to purchase. And that would be a unified hospitality development. So he should consolidate the property for it to appear that he's intended to have a plan unit development.
Okay, I know, let me just interject here. Now we're starting to talk about a specific proposal. I think we were just talking about the B3. I know that one of the commissioners has a recusal on this, and so I don't want to talk about a specific proposal. We're talking generally about B3 and whether it functions or not on this discussion.
But we're talking about B3 in light of what happened the last time. So let's also not pretend as though there's not a preceding factor. Now, if you don't want us to discuss it, I'll lay off it. But what I'm saying is that there was a preceding incident that has brought up this discussion. The question here is to be as flexible as possible in your thinking to ultimately make sure that Townsend gets what it wants so that it doesn't become a gamesmanship of people at times putting the city at risk for lawsuits.
Okay, a lot of discussion there. A lot of discussion. All right. I wonder how this, the commission, after discussing for so long, I'll just make a motion, we'll see if it goes anywhere. I move that the commission adopt the recommendation that I've proposed as the commission's position to forward to the city council. So I'll make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and second. Any further discussion?
Oh, can you restate what your motion is?
My motion is for the planning commission to adopt my statement to the city council from the planning commission chairman as their own view in regards to correcting the B3 problems by re-implementing B1, B2 while B3 gets worked on for however long it takes to be implemented in the correct form where it's functional.
I'm clear.
Okay. All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, we have 3 ayes and 2 opposed. The motion passed. So I will forward this to the city council for their consideration at the next meeting. Okie dokie. Let's see. We have old business. There's nothing under old business. We have other business, local administrative items. I believe that Kim has got an updated map for us.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. One is a map, which is a proposed future land use plan map. This map is in no way something that is going to end up in the zoning ordinance. Absolutely not. It's simply a suggestion on future land use, should in case a developer and a property owner wants to use it to their advantage, and which is in keeping with what the city would want to do with its land use patterns across the board. So this is just simply going into the land use plan, if indeed this is what will be the final adaptation as a policy in the land use plan, but it will not end up, or it will not inevitably end up in the zoning ordinance. Okay? And this is but one step in a process to look on a grand scale of what land uses that the city wants to think of as policy into its future. That's simply what this particular map is.
I understand that. But if it goes in there and then a board decides they're going to change it, they'll go back to that and say, look, this is what you all wanted. And you've not consulted the people of Townsend, how you're changing it.
Exactly. As I've just mentioned, this map is a result of an exercise. It's going to be part of the CPAC process.
I understand that.
Where
But you're going to put it in a land use plan, and that land use plan carries weight. Is that correct?
a land use
Does
plan,
it carry weight?
Hold on, Tom. You're getting a little excited here. The land use plan is under development. Their land use plan has not been adopted. There's been no action taken. It hasn't even been crafted yet. So this is just going to be part of a document that's still being crafted that everybody's going to get a chance to be a part of.
I'll say what the previous chairman said at the planning commission. Quit playing God.
Can I ask a question? Who generated this map?
this was when the discussion came about with the B3 and about what zoning designations should be thought through for the city. So now this map is part of an exercise. This is not anything that has been adapted. It
I
is
understand.
one product of an exercise.
Yeah, I'm trying to ask,
So,
who
we-
generated the exercise?
We had a workshop.
Okay,
It was in September, I believe, where I was charged by some of the city council members to do a windshield survey to see which parcels in the city of Townsend, with the change of the B3, B2, are now non-conforming based on their pre-existing use now. So basically what you're looking at is the campgrounds are labeled as B2s, B3s rather. There are some R2s that were not identified earlier on, like the landing down here, the condos, that's still an R1. So basically, this was a windshield survey to look at each parcel individually and see what it was being used for and identify if that was the current land use designation it should have. And so I made those changes on the city map with the colored pen, and I just gave them to Kim. He took them to the office. He had somebody draft this map for us to use as a tool, as a visual exercise to see what we're dealing with.
Yes, and if you also look at if the big map is available, they will allow you to see. Each of these designations are simply a suggestion, an exercise, and each one is also indicated with a question mark, and there's also a clear disclaimer at the bottom, what this map is and what it is not. And it is certainly not anything that is adaptable or that's going to be used as a regulation. And it's also going to be subject to an exercise, community-wide, for the city to decide what its long-term land use plan are. Full stop.
Thank you. Mayor, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to recall as well that this did come out of a workshop. So we had a public workshop, and we were talking about what are the current apparent zoning uses of different parcels in the city of Townsend. Not what they're actually zoned, but what does it appear like they're being used for? And so we did ask for, as part of that public workshop, to have Commissioner Talley and Commissioner Lindsay, I think, go out and conduct this windshield survey, and this is the deliverable from that. So we did ask for this, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it, because I'm sure it took quite a lot of time to really look at this to see kind of what the actual status is if you sort of apply the current zoning types, and I think that's what I wanted to just affirm, that these are all current potential zoning types in Townsend. You didn't create any new zoning types.
No.
You looked at what's actually being used in Townsend and what does it sort of appear if we had used all of the different zoning types at our disposal. So I think it will be useful in informing how we take this forward with the community plan. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. All right. Any other questions or
thanks
comments?
for clarifying.
Okay. Very good. Any questions on the proposed map for consideration? All right. Moving on. Do we have any status reports? Anything?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you've got the Gantt
The
chart.
Gantt chart, which I had promised to supply to the CPAC. I'd hoped that they would be here to present it. But basic thing is we submitted an initial one. This is a revision of that initial one, given what dynamics we have on the ground right now. And there are some tasks there, and the tasks include data and mapping, zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, land use, transportation and corridor management, historic preservation, and grants. Basically, how are you going to fund the implementation of what you plan to get done in the CPAC process or anything else you devise or think of. So right now, we have been heavy on the data, and we have worked to put some graphics together about the profile of Townsend. We've been working with UT Data Center every graph or the data that we've come up with provides a story, a narrative of what Townsend is. So now we're going to be working with the UT Data Center to come up with a narrative of what this data should tell us and how we maybe should think about it in light of what we seem to appear to be. Okay? Now, in addition to the data, which we've got through mainly census, we're also going to be working to do some mapping. So basically, the portrait of what Townsend is what this exercise is all about. We hope to have the portrait, including the narrative for the graphics, done by the end of the month of December. In January, we hope to have a workshop and a focus group. A focus group with CPAC and or a public workshop with the community. So it could be either one or both, but both of them will be public meeting, basically. Now, after we have done that, we would hope to have all that resoundingly completed after public input at the end of February. Okay? That is going to help inform how we think of things such as the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations. The zoning ordinance will tell you what you would want to think of in terms of any rezonings, any redefinitions, any reconceptualization, any intents of any particular zoning designation, that sort of thing. And that will then start in December as well, in the sense that the planning team at ETED, my office, are going to be looking through the documents, the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations. So for example, what is this heavy reliance on definitions, when the definitions are what is stymieing some imagination of what the city should be, or some using it as a tool to keep things out, and they end up having issues with them becoming an area of contention. So the question is, we also don't want a plan that sits on the shelf that has either too strict language or has not clear language that should allow the city to have reasonable decisions with some accommodation that meets everybody's needs. So that's basically what we'll be doing with the zoning ordinance and also the subdivision regulations. So we will have publishable data by February for the data and the mapping. We hope to have initial drafts of the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations by April. So there are also some listings here that further describe everything that we plan to do for the next 5 months. And after the 5 months, then we'll have the final Gantt chart that will show how we plan to finish up the entire process, be that be July, August, or September. So one of the things in here is to also make sure that we have a process where the land use policies in this exception phase and beyond, this is under number 6, will be informed by the zoning ordinance, as I've just mentioned. Okay? And then one of the things that we also want to discuss is, or want you to consider, is the idea that maybe the planning commission should be separate from the zoning board and should be separate from city council, so that the planning commission, for example, just deals with land use and subdivision regs, and then you have a zoning board that deals with everything that deals with zoning. So they decide, and I'm not saying that it should happen, I'm saying that this is an idea to be thinking about when we have those workshops coming for the zoning ordinance and the land use plan and for the subdivision regulations.
That'll be in February.
Yeah, that will be starting in February. We will have, exactly, we'll have the workshops for the zoning and the ordinances starting maybe as early as February, yes, and going on to April, or it might even start as early as January. The idea being is that we want to have a workshop after we have developed the data and so we can get some feedback that will feed into the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations. Now, when it comes to the corridor management plan, TDOT typically funds those, and those are seconded out to engineering consulting firm. And I had a discussion with TDOT at the RPO meeting in which Becky was at. And so Becky, works for a consulting firm as well. So we're going to try and figure out how and what the process is to procure an engineering firm to do that particular study. So that will start with the CPAC process, but it probably will not end with the CPAC process. It will now break off and deal with corridor management aside CPAC, because that process that TDOT has for it will not fit into the rigid guidelines that we've set for CPAC. Okay? Then, for historic preservation, we have asked CPAC twice. We are yet to get back some feedback on what they think what would they want to consider or have addressed when it comes to historic preservation. Whether it's the archaeological issues dealing with the first settlers, whether it has to do with the theater, where the department wants perform that, whatever that is, our historic preservation plan, I would like to know what that is, so that she can also contextualize what your opportunities are and ways in which those things can be funded. Then, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that we don't want to, one thing we certainly, I don't want to have happen is that we just come up with all these highfalutin ideas that get nowhere. We want to make sure that there are routes to actually have them implemented all the way down to having the financial resources to do that. So that would mean chasing down grants, and for which some would require matches, and for which City Council will have to figure out if they have the monies to match those things so they can be done. And so our grant management team, our grants writing team, will work with the city again in a workshop to figure out, okay, this is what you want to do, how we want to package the project to put into a proposal so it gets realized. And again, everything is over here. The 10
Footnotes.
exactly. So I will leave these documents with CPAC, and then CPAC can figure out how to inform the public about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I might just
Please.
put a little frame around this, so thank you, Kim, for sharing this. So usually at every city council meeting and every planning commission meeting for the last year, we have an item on the agenda that's a CPAC update. So it didn't appear on the agenda tonight, maybe because Mr. Hope is not, the chair of the group is not here tonight. So I think the planning commission should take this as your CPAC update, but it is important. And I asked for our consultants, ETDD, to prepare this Gantt chart, because we are moving into a phase of the community plan work where we're going to be moving beyond the vision statement. So we're going to be looking to finalize the work on the vision statement pretty soon. And we need to understand what's going to need to take place over the next several months so that we can get this plan updated by the end of the summer. So that's our target goal, is to try to get the community plan or our land use and transportation plan updated by the end of the summer. And so I asked, let's put this on a Gantt chart. What are these things that we're going to get done? Some of the things I think that ETDD, and it's a separate group, Kim also works with this group, but it is a separate group within ETDD that's a consultant on this project. So some of these are ideas that, I think, are just being offered. But the process is that the CPAC makes a recommendation. All this work is a recommendation to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is the group that's ultimately responsible for this plan, and that's why there's an update on there. The vision is that the Planning Commission will approve a new community plan with all the input from the public, and then it will be endorsed by the Board of Commissioners. And so this will take place probably in the late summer and fall, and that's the general timeline. But we provide these updates so that everybody understands where we are in the project And what are some of these steps? There's a big data initiative going on right now, and I'm glad to hear that you're working with UT on that as well, because they have helped us previously. But it's important to keep planning commissioners informed on what's happening, and I think this Gantt chart goes a long ways there. I will just take this opportunity to reiterate to planning commissioners, if you have any feedback on these vision elements, please get them to the CPAC. You can send them to David Hoke by next Tuesday. So another opportunity. We're going to ask Board of Commissioners to also provide their sort of final feedback on that so that we can finish up the work on the vision statement and then continue to work on the rest of the community plan.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Kim, where will the list of comprehensive policies be in the plan to guide future decisions regarding zoning changes and such?
When, you said, right?
Where in the plan?
Where in the plan?
Where?
Okay.
What section?
It's
That-
either 5 or 6 is the section number. Is it?
Titled,
I don't have it in front of me, but remember, the request from the scoping document was to update the current land use and transportation plans using the same basic sections. And you're right, Commissioner Rett, there is a section in there on land use policies. I just can't remember if it's 5 or 6.
the policies are extremely important component of the plan as the basis for future ordinance changes.
Exactly, it's the most important section.
First of all, when those will start to be finalized will be after April. June, July, August. Okay? That's when we'll have that done. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we want the city to veer away from a plan that is simply full of ambiguous language and rigorous definitions.
We want very specific language so that we can make a decision based on the criteria that's already been adopted by the local government, that is, those policies.
Yes, and what I'm trying to get you to understand is that what we're going to be working towards more so than anything else is to come up with a tool for which you can make decisions,
Right.
not a narrative-heavy document that has ambiguous language and rigid definitions that don't get you anywhere, and whereby you keep revisiting that you want to change it, you want to change it, you want to change it.
There's a
Because the
section.
The plan we have amended as necessary in the future if that becomes necessary. The policies in the plan can be amended, of course, as well.
The policies we hope will be relevant for, at least the next 10 years. There's a section that follows the land use policies, it's called the implementation section. And those are recommendations for implementation. And if you look at the current land use and transportation plan, there are a number of things that are recommended for implementation. For example, architectural review board that have never been implemented. And so it's up to the Board of Commissioners or the Planning Commission to then take up those recommendations on how to implement it. But hopefully the policies will be at a level that they will continue to be relevant and guide the development of the city for the next 10 or 20 years.
Exactly. So what I'm trying to say is that we're not going to be working on a plan that is going to be a victim to retroactive behavior. Because it didn't happen, we're going to change it. Because we didn't like it, we're going to change it. The idea is that it should be a document that should be a toolbox for decision making.
Yes, of course, and I'm familiar with the process. I just wonder, I'm hearing the planning commission is going to be involved in the process and approving policies, and I'm wondering when we will start to see information that will be policies. We had some of it talked about earlier, but we need to be seeing and being fed some of that right along as it's being come up with. And additionally, some of that would be very good to have distributed to the public at large during the process as well, so that we're not jammed toward the end with making decisions and, the public is unhappy because they haven't had full opportunity. We need to give everybody the chance.
The way it works is that the Planning Commission is kept informed all along for the last year. Every single meeting, the Planning Commission is informed just like we're doing tonight. And there's an opportunity for a planning commission to provide feedback right from the very earliest stages. So the vision is the first thing. And so last month, planning commissioners were asked to provide feedback. If we can get that by Tuesday, that will be good. And then here's the layout for the next several months for the work that ETDD is doing. All this work is shared at the Community Plan Advisory Committee meetings, which meet on the third Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So all the documents are available. They will all be discussed at the Community Plan Advisory Committee. So they're all publicly available.
And like I mentioned when I made my presentation, this will be done via focus groups and or community workshops. Similar to when you had some focus groups with some stakeholders, and as we had the open house workshop, among other things, those dynamic interactions, those deliberations will generate the final. We are not going to tell you what you are going to come up with it after we have engaged you in some deliberation.
Have we identified stakeholders?
The stakeholders will depend on the issues at hand. So for example, if there are people who have an interest in historic preservation, we will go to them to make sure that we get them. The owners of those particular properties, for example, will be one thing. And when it comes to the transportation and the corridor management, it will have to involve the partnership, the business along 321, and the residents that live along 321. What things can we discuss, come up with in terms of transition zones, zone ordinances, access to particular high traffic sites without impeding on the neighbors that live adjacent to these things. So it all depends on each one. And as and when we decide and determine what the content of that will be, we will know what stakeholders to involve.
How will we be assured that as we identify stakeholders to have input on the plan, we identify business community certainly has a large stake, the nonprofits in the area certainly have a large stake, and the public at large has a large stake. How do we ensure all that gets balanced out such that John Q. Public gets to have his say and to have his thoughts regarding the plan?
Everything
If I can address that. Yeah, that's a good point. And for the vision statement, which is just the first element in the community plan, we sent out surveys, we collected information, we sent out, did all kinds of web outreach, we had focus groups, we had community open house. Those are all the things that we did to make sure that we got stakeholder input and that we got community input. I don't have the exact figure on those surveys, over 900 surveys. We can tell you how many we got from folks that are actually local residents. And the process will continue to be engage the public. And so every month we have a meeting open to the public, documents are available. I think it's recorded that we can share those meetings. And so all that is open to the public and to stakeholders and to commissioners. I think some planning commissioners do attend that meeting, some regularly.
I've been to some of those.
Yeah.
So as we get toward the end of the process, we're going to have folks who are very interested in specific policies that will be contained in the document that will not have been covered by some of the general statements that were discovered as a part of the public participation process and the questions that went out with the questionnaire. It's an inevitable part of the process that will reach that particular point.
Right.
We need to be prepared for that and know that that will be coming in the future and see that it is, see that we've covered all of those bases.
It's a good observation, and I will assure you that we'll continue to have as much engagement as people want. All stakeholders that we can possibly reach. And as we identify specific issues, as Kim mentioned, there will be, maybe specific stakeholders that we might need to engage with, TDOT or something like that. So we will be reaching out to all those stakeholders. I think that's what's happening now in the data generation.
Yes, and what I'm trying to get you to understand as well is that what is important is not necessarily just a policy. Because like what I've tried to explain earlier, you might think that your policy is wise as hell, and then down the line, it actually trips you up. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is that for each policy, there will be a litmus test of whether that policy is gaining and what you are intending to gain, devoid of any strict definitions or myopic thinking that you think you are aiming at. You get what I'm saying? So it is that which, most of all, the community needs to think about. Not necessarily the policy, but the litmus test for how effective that policy is going to be now, in the future, and forevermore, given what you see for Townsend.
Are you convinced that the data that we've collected so far is going to be sufficient to account for the level of specific detail we need to have in policies?
I'm not convinced about anything until you see the data and you discuss it and come up with an understanding of it. I'm not convinced about anything.
All right. Okay, well, that's a lot of good discussion. I will cap it up by saying, you guys don't have a copy of this Gantt chart. This really outlines what's going to be happening over the next couple of months. It's got really good footnotes in it. If you want to keep on top of what's happening, request one of these copies. It's good information. Thank you for preparing this for us again.
I will email the electronic copy to Gail Associates to make even more copies than I've provided.
Yeah, I'm going to keep this next to my calendar.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's see, is there any other business?
Yeah,
Wait,
I've been sitting back here waiting all this time. I put my name on the list to discuss. And I
you
never got the call upon.
put your name down for public input?
Yes, I did. And it seems that y'all avoiding.
I apologize, I didn't see where
You-
it
you're
could be,
avoiding
didn't have
your
anything straight
intention.
on the addressable.
Your intention, when you say that crazy old man, we don't need him back up here again. But
3 minutes, sir. State your name, please.
Thomas Talley, I think you know me. Let me get this clear on this B3 business. You all are sending a recommendation to the city council, is that right?
Yes.
You're sending a recommendation. I have been in touch with Mr. Stewart, who is, you all had approved his rezoning for campground deal. And it, on second reading, it got turned down by the city council. So the question is, what is his next option? I spoke with him this afternoon because, well, I'll go into that, what I talked to him about in a minute, but in an interim, as I understand the process, he could go before the BZA. But when I read the section of BZA, your planning stuff, it only deals with inadequate lot sizes or those sorts of things. It really doesn't, I don't think it addresses rezoning, does it? I mean, that's a question too. Does your BZA have the authority to rezone to a B3? Because, see, your sequence of events here is, you all approved this. BZA meets before your city council meets. So if the city council approves or disapproves, may have a tremendous influence over what we do. But to get before the BZA, have to go before the city council ever considers this, which really may be a waste of time and trouble for everybody. You see what, you see the sequence problems here.
You see,
So,
that's what I tried to explain to Mr. Brett Stewart. That's what I was trying to address here, and I was told not to address it. Number one, I came up with a solution for Mr. Stewart. He wasn't willing to listen to what I was going to suggest to them. The other thing I was trying to tell you guys is that the BZA is equally a legislative body as the city council is. So the BZA is a body unto itself, unto the decision that it makes. And I had suggested this to Mr. Stewart, what he could do to go before the BZA, and he wouldn't listen to me. Which everything that has been under contention now would have completely been solved if, as I said before, everybody had let things prevail as they could prevail. This is where, for example, the idea is that it's not a strict definition that you have to game at. It's rather a negotiation and a discussion of what could be possible given the rules.
Okay. I'll just say, go before the BZA. I've heard that suggested, but I still do not understand the action which should be requested of the BZA if you were to go before it. I have not.
See, we're here in the intermediate deal. You guys say, yes, go back to B1. But the BZA is kind of
I attempted to-
hanging in the middle.
I attempted to explain that, and I wasn't getting anybody listening.
It's a fair question, Mr. Talley. We'll get an answer. We'll check with the city attorney with, about the scope of the BZA, and we will get back to you within a few days on the answer.
Okay.
Is that fair? I mean, I think it's a fair question. I want to make sure that we give you the most accurate information. So let us check it with the city attorney. And I'm addressing you now as a member of the Board of Commissioners, not as the Planning Commission. Because that was something that came before the Board of Commissioners. And so we will check that and we will get you an answer within just a few days. And we'll take the advice of city planner, but this is not the right forum to discuss an action of the Board of Commissioners at the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Yes.
My next point, if you'll excuse the 3-minute limit here. I and my wife own 33% of the Tallyho Inn partnership, which is the selling entity in this process that's been going on now for about 6 months. We are seriously considering joining in with Mr. Stewart in requesting the campground permit. I'll just put it that plainly, whether it's B3 or whatever. Is there any particular reason why we could not be doing this? Or is there any particular reason, process by which we should be doing this? To join in to request the permit. Either the rezoning or the permitting of a campground on that site. Is there any particular document that we need? Do we need to fill out something with the city of Townsend?
We can give you information on how to request a campground or how to address a campground. I would just observe, I think at this point, you know, Mr. Stewart is not an owner of the property. He might be an owner in the future. And so there is a process for requesting a campground or a RV park, if that's what you're interested in. And so
What is that process?
well, I have to.
I guess he's
And
asking.
that's what I'm saying, that is what I suggested to Mr. Stewart, which would have included some communication with Will and his attorney to figure out how this could be done. I had a whole game plan of how this could happen, but nobody was listening to what I was trying to tell them. And so it's not got anywhere. But when I spoke to Mr. Stewart, I had a suggestion for him, and everybody was hot-tempered about what they thought were being denied. And as I mentioned to Mr. Stewart and everybody else, is that I'm not in the business of denying people things. I'm in the business of working to figure out what can everything be done so that everybody feels they've had a fair process to get what they think they deserve. And I just kept getting the wall throughout. I had mentioned having communication with Will to figure out how this should be done, and I wasn't getting anywhere with anybody.
But Mr. Talley's asking, how does he make that request to start the process to, he's asking, is there a
To
permit or
join, to join with
formality?
Mr. Stewart in this request, because frankly, if Mr. Stewart decides through his due diligence process that he wants to bail out, he's already indicated to me he's getting somewhat frustrated with dealing with the city of Townsend area. He does not even know if he wants to be over here on this side of the mountain or not. If this deal, this buy, sell deal falls through the cracks, we as sellers very well may be coming back to you, asking you these very same questions again, and that's why I am in the process right now of joining with him in his request, so that if he bows out of the request, I'll keep the darn thing going until they put me in Bethel up there.
Well, if I may, as chairman, let's get this back on track. Mr. Talley's requesting that if he chooses, what kind of request, to whom should he make it? Is it in the form of an application or a permit or something to that effect? If he chooses to request the rezoning on his own, or how does he go about that process?
That's what I tried to explain to Mr. Stewart, and he said he was not going to do it.
But that doesn't matter.
And so let me explain to you what I'm suggesting that be done. That he go before the Board of Zoning Appeals and ask for a use upon review, and for certain, as I mentioned to him.
Is this what you're recommending Mr. Talley do? Mr. Talley is asking about his viable options moving forward. He's just requesting, how does he start the process if he wants to go about rezoning or what his options are? And we can talk about this outside of an open meeting, I guess.
Honestly, I'm not sure this is where we ought to be
Yeah.
talking about this.
Exactly. This is more an administrative thing.
Yeah, that's what I had suggested from the beginning.
Yeah.
So what I would do is that what I had intended to write out, given my communication with Mr.
So we will do that.
I was good, yes, I had wanted
Okay,
to.
so let's just leave it at, because I made an email request over a week ago requesting the same information, and I haven't received a response. But if we can be assured that we'll get a response in a couple of days, then let's just leave it at that. And
Let me say this. I had mentioned to Mr. Stewart, he told me he wasn't interested. I also discussed it with you about the way forward to get this done. What I had suggested that we do, or what I was attempting to suggest that we do, is that I write up something and I send it to Will.
You send it to whom?
We'll get a response to you, and we'll describe exactly, answer your question.
Can I ask a question? I'm a little confused. Right now, that property is zoned B1. If he asked the BZA to allow him to put a campground on that B1, does the BZA have the authority to tell him yes or no?
That's a question that we're gonna, I said this a few minutes ago, Commissioner Jenkins, we're gonna work with the city attorney, and the city will answer the question, and we'll get you the information in just a few days.
Is there a form for requesting something go before the BZA?
There is a process for requesting to go in front of the BZA, and it's in the zoning ordinance.
So is there-
I'll tell you the section.
Yeah, I'm just asking if there's a form, not whether there's a section.
Okay, I'm sorry to take more than 3 minutes, but frankly, I've spent a good part of the last 2 months behind the computer reading everything that I can possibly get a hold of, as far as zoning and planning is concerned. Tomorrow, I'm going to go be seeing a planning and zoning attorney in Knoxville. And if he asked me who in the city of Townsend should he contact in order to adequately represent me and my wife, should I be giving him Mr. Carver's name, or should I be giving him Mr. Eaton's name, or what? Because we want this situation resolved one way or the other.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Cal. I'll answer your question. You can address that to the mayor, and the mayor will engage the city attorney because he helps us with our legal stuff.
Can I get your
That's it, yeah,
your telephone number and so forth, so.
absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Commissioner Jenkins, chapter 9, 8901 describes the procedures for coming before the Board of Zoning Appeals. In this situation, Mr. Talley has asked a good question, and it requires some interpretation to be able to answer his question. It takes some legal interpretation. And so that's why we need to get with the city attorney to be able to give you the best, most accurate information. And I suggest that we leave it there for tonight.
I'll let it go then. So I'm going to inform Mr. Stewart that he can't come to the BZA.
We don't know that yet.
We
Wait
don't
until.
know.
We'll let you know in just a few days.
For you.
Okay.
All right. At the risk, is there any other business? Okay, I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Upon discussion, we almost made it 2.5 hours on a planning commission meeting. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you for participating.